I never imagined that a simple return home would turn my life upside down. After a short business trip to Los Angeles, I expected nothing more than the comfort of my apartment, the one I'd worked so hard to secure and furnish. What I found instead was an unexpected betrayal from the people I least expected it from, my own family. When I opened the door to my apartment, the sight that greeted me was far from the peaceful sanctuary I had left behind. There, sitting comfortably on my couch, was my older brother, Ben. His feet were carelessly propped up on my coffee table, the same coffee table I had restored myself after finding it at a flea market in Portland. Beside him was his wife, Rachel, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of the violation they had just committed. Their 3-year-old son, Max, was on the floor, playing with a toy car, a car that used to be mine. It was an old, worn-out model my grandfather had given me when I was a child. The anger surged within me, but I fought to keep it in check. I dropped my suitcase at the door, my eyes scanning the apartment in disbelief. The once immaculate rug I had imported from Morocco was now stained with juice, the painting I had painstakingly hung on the wall was crooked, and worst of all, my personal photographs were gone. My stomach twisted into knots. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Ben looked up at me, a grin plastered on his face. "Oh, look who's back," he said, as though nothing were amiss. Rachel barely looked up from her phone, but there was no mistaking the smug expression on her face. I felt a sharp pang in my chest as I took in the sight of my grandmother's old armchair, now covered with a cheap throw blanket. My grandmother's perfume had always lingered in that chair, but now it smelled of something far less comforting. And that was just the beginning. They had moved in as if they owned the place. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my efforts to keep it composed. Rachel finally set her phone down and let out a condescending laugh. "Well, Ben thought it would be nice to settle in here while we find something more permanent. It's hard to find a decent place with a kid, you know," she said, her tone dripping with entitlement. "Settle in?" I repeated, my disbelief evident. "This is my apartment." Ben stood up, shrugging as if he were doing me a favor. "Grandma always wanted this place to stay in the family. And you're alone. You don't really need all this space, do you?" His words felt like a slap across my face. My grandmother had left me this apartment in her will. She had explicitly stated that it was for me, not for anyone else. I felt a wave of rage wash over me. "This is my house, Ben. Not yours. Not Rachel's. Mine." Ben let out a dramatic sigh, as if I were the unreasonable one. "Don't be selfish, Lauren. Think about Max. The nerve. They were trying to guilt-trip me, to make me feel like the bad guy for wanting what was rightfully mine." My heart pounded in my chest. "How dare you move in without telling me?" I said, barely holding back my anger. Ben rolled his eyes. "You're overreacting. We're just here for a little while until we find a place of our own." I could feel my hands trembling, but I clenched my fists, fighting to control my emotions. The mess around me wasn't just a careless clutter, it was a symbol of their disregard for my life, for my space. They were trying to erase me from my own home. The lavender plant I kept on the windowsill was gone, replaced by a baby bottle and a container of formula. The handmade blanket my grandmother had knitted for me was nowhere to be found. In its place was a hideous synthetic throw, covered in cartoon bears. The invasion was complete. They were replacing my life with their own. I turned to Rachel, who stood there with her arms crossed, looking unimpressed. "If you were a decent person, we wouldn't be having this conversation," I said, my voice sharp with anger. Rachel's face twisted into a fake smile. "Oh, Lauren, don't make this harder than it needs to be," she said, her voice laced with mock sweetness. "You have money, don't you? You can rent a place somewhere else." I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "Excuse me?" Ben stepped in, using the same patronizing tone he always used when he thought he could talk me down. "You could help us out, Lauren. Just share your place with us for a little while. It's the family thing to do. Share? I repeated, my voice rising. You want me to share my home with you? I've worked my entire life for this, and now you think you can just take it? Ben's face hardened. Come on, don't make this ugly, Lauren. We're family. Yeah, I shot back, my voice low and cold. You're family. But you don't just steal from family. Rachel let out a scoff, looking at me like I was the unreasonable one. Oh my God, all this drama, she muttered. We're just trying to make a better life for Max. Is that so hard to understand? My mind was racing. I needed a plan. But for now, one thing was clear, I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Not this time. I looked Ben straight in the eyes. Get out, I said, my voice steady and unyielding. Ben's face flushed red with indignation. He was the kind of person who always thought he could talk his way out of anything, but I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Are you serious? He scoffed, his voice laced with disbelief. You want us to leave, just like that? I crossed my arms and held my ground. Yes, I do. I want you both out of my apartment. Now. Ben let out an exaggerated sigh, rolling his eyes. You're being dramatic. All we're asking for is a little time, just until we can get settled. It's not like we're asking for a lifetime. But that was the thing about Ben. He never understood boundaries, never recognized when enough was enough. It was always about what he wanted, what Rachel wanted, and never about what anyone else needed. It had always been this way. You've already taken too much, I said, my voice quieter but no less firm. You've taken what was never yours to begin with. Rachel, still standing behind Ben with her arms crossed, shot me a look that could have frozen ice. You've got a lot of nerve, Lauren, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. You think you can just kick us out after everything we've done for you? I raised an eyebrow. Done for me? You mean, you've done for yourselves. You've moved into my apartment without my permission, taken my things, and now you're telling me that I'm the one in the wrong? Rachel opened her mouth to retort, but I cut her off. Enough, Rachel. I don't need a lecture on generosity from you. Ben glared at me, his nostrils flaring. You're unbelievable, he muttered under his breath, clearly frustrated. We're family, Lauren. This is what family does for each other. We help each other out. I didn't ask for your help, I shot back, my words sharp and biting. And this isn't about family. This is about respect. And right now, you're showing none. Ben's face darkened, and he took a step toward me. You really want to make this a fight, huh? You think you're going to win by being stubborn? I stood tall, staring him down. I'm not the one who started this. You've been playing me for years, Ben. This is the last straw. He let out a sarcastic laugh. What, now you're going to make everything into a drama? Fine, Lauren. I get it. You want to be alone in your little bubble, and you're not going to share anything with anyone, not even family. I clenched my fists, but I didn't let my anger get the best of me. Instead, I just shook my head, disappointment settling heavily in my chest. That's not it, Ben. But I'll tell you what, you don't get to just waltz in here and take what you want, when you want. Not anymore. Max, oblivious to the tension in the room, continued to play with his toy car on the floor. I watched him for a moment, feeling a pang of sadness. I knew how much Ben loved to use his son as leverage, as though his fatherhood gave him some kind of free pass to do whatever he wanted. But I wasn't going to let that work this time. Rachel seemed to notice my gaze lingering on Max and quickly stepped in, trying to regain control of the conversation. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Lauren. We're family. This is temporary. You'll see. Just give it some time. Her words were insidious, meant to wear me down, to make me doubt myself. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. Rachel, you don't get it, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I've been patient. I've given you both more chances than you deserve. But this is my home. You don't just walk in here and take it. You've crossed a line. Ben's expression twisted into something darker, something almost dangerous. You don't want to do this, Lauren. You're going to regret it. I knew exactly what he was trying to do. He was trying to intimidate me, trying to scare me into submission. But I wasn't that person anymore. The old Lauren, the one who would back down at the slightest confrontation, was long gone. I had learned that standing up for myself wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. I'm not afraid of you, Ben, I said, my voice unwavering. Rachel let out an exasperated sigh, finally standing up. You're really going to make us leave, huh? Fine. Have it your way. But just remember, you're not the only one who can play dirty. For a moment, I was taken aback by the venom in her words. It was like a warning, a subtle threat. But I refused to be intimidated. I had no intention of backing down, no matter what they said or did. Ben and Rachel exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. I could see the gears turning in Ben's mind as he tried to figure out how to regain control of the situation. But I wasn't going to let him. Get out, I repeated, this time with even more resolve. Now. Ben's face contorted with fury, and for a moment, I thought he might actually lunge at me. But instead, he clenched his fists, teeth grinding in frustration. You're making a huge mistake, Lauren, he spat, before storming toward the door. I watched him leave, his footsteps heavy with anger. But just as he reached the door, he turned back, his eyes burning with something much darker. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You'll regret this. I didn't respond. I just stood there, my heart pounding, as the door slammed behind him. The apartment fell eerily quiet after Ben and Rachel left. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. It was like the storm had passed, but I could still feel its ominous presence, lurking just beyond the horizon, waiting to make its return. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, wondering if I had just made a huge mistake. Had I done the right thing? Was I really prepared for the fallout that would inevitably come from this? I shook my head, trying to dispel the doubt that was creeping in. I had to stay strong. I knew I did. Turning around, I glanced at Max, who was still sitting on the floor, playing with his toy cars. The innocent sound of his laughter, the soft clink of plastic wheels against the wooden floor, reminded me why I had to put my foot down. Max deserved better than to be dragged into the chaos that Ben and Rachel had brought into my life. I needed to protect him, to keep him safe from all the drama, the manipulation, the lies. I kneeled beside him, a smile tugging at my lips as I reached out to ruffle his hair. Hey, buddy, I said, trying to sound cheerful. What are you up to? Max looked up at me, his wide eyes filled with wonder. I'm making a racetrack, Mommy. Want to watch? I couldn't help but laugh softly. The simplicity of his joy, the innocence in his world, was a stark contrast to the storm brewing in mine. For a moment, I allowed myself to forget everything that had just happened, to lose myself in the quiet serenity of the moment. But the peace didn't last long. I could hear the sound of footsteps approaching from down the hallway, a sharp knock on the door interrupting my brief moment of calm. My heart skipped a beat as I stood up, a sense of unease washing over me. Who could it be? I made my way to the door slowly, my steps deliberate, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. As I peered through the peephole, I saw a figure standing outside. It was too dark to make out any details clearly, but I didn't need to. I already knew who it was. Ben. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What was he doing back here? Hadn't he gotten the message? Hadn't I made myself clear? I hesitated for a moment, debating whether I should even open the door. But I knew I couldn't just leave things like this. I had to face him. I had to stand my ground. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door and swung it open. Ben stood there, his face set in a grimace, his arms crossed over his chest. The familiar tension in his posture told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here to confront me, to try and bend me to his will. I thought I made myself clear, Ben, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. You need to leave. Now. He didn't move. Instead, his eyes narrowed as he looked at me with a mixture of frustration and something darker, resentment, maybe even hatred. You think you can just throw me out of here and that's it, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You really think it's that simple? I'm not playing this game anymore, Ben, I replied firmly. I gave you every chance to do the right thing. I tried to be patient, to be understanding. But you crossed a line. And now, it's over. His jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought he might snap. You don't get it, do you? He hissed, his voice rising. You're making a huge mistake. You can't just shut us out like this. You can't get rid of your family like that. I took a step back, shaking my head. No, Ben. I can't keep enabling this. I can't let you continue using me and Rachel for your own gain. This ends now. Ben stepped forward, a dangerous glint in his eyes. You think you can just throw me out of your life and that's it? You think I'm going to let you walk away from this without any consequences? I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. What was he talking about? What did he mean by consequences? Was he threatening me? Before I could say anything, he continued, his voice almost a growl. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Lauren. If you think this is over, you're wrong. You've just opened a door you won't be able to close. The words hung in the air, thick with menace. I could feel my blood run cold. Was he serious? Was he really threatening me? You're not going to intimidate me, Ben, I said, my voice trembling slightly, but I refused to back down. You're done. This is my life, my home. You're not welcome here anymore. Ben stood there for a long moment, just staring at me, his chest heaving with barely contained rage. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed off, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway. I closed the door behind him, locking it with trembling hands. I leaned against the door for a moment, trying to calm my breathing, my heart racing in my chest. What had just happened? What had Ben meant by consequences? And what did he really think he could do to me? Max, who had been silently watching from the living room, came running over to me. He wrapped his tiny arms around my legs, looking up at me with wide eyes. Mommy, is everything okay? He asked, his voice filled with concern. I knelt down, pulling him into my arms. Everything's fine, sweetheart, I said, forcing a smile. Everything's going to be okay. But deep down, I knew the storm was far from over. Ben had warned me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something much worse was coming. And this time, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The days after Ben's visit were like walking on eggshells. Every little sound, every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside felt like a warning. I couldn't shake the unease that clung to me like a shadow, following me wherever I went. Max could sense it too. He'd ask more questions, stare up at me with those wide, innocent eyes, as if he could read the fear in mine. I tried to reassure him, but I knew that the calm we had fought so hard for was slipping away. It wasn't just the lingering threat of Ben that was making me anxious. The phone calls had started again, just as I feared. They were subtle at first, strange numbers, quick hang-ups, or silent voices on the other end of the line. I told myself it was nothing, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but deep down I knew better. Ben was making good on his promise. He wasn't going to let me off that easily. The third night after Ben's confrontation, the phone rang again, cutting through the silence of the apartment like a knife. I hesitated, watching the screen as an unknown number flashed. My stomach churned, and I picked up the phone, hoping for the best but expecting the worst. Hello? My voice was steady, even though my hands were shaking. Silence. Then, a low chuckle. A familiar, bone-chilling sound. Did you really think you could escape, Lauren? Ben's voice came through the line, cold and threatening. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart thudded in my chest. Ben, stop it. Leave me alone, I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to sound strong. You think this is over? He laughed again, the sound grating against my nerves. You think you can just cut me out of your life like a bad memory? No, Lauren. I'm not done. Not by a long shot. His words felt like a punch to the gut. The air in the room seemed to thicken as I tried to gather my thoughts. How could he do this? How could he continue to torment me after everything that had happened? You don't have the right to do this, I managed to say, though my voice trembled with fear. I told you it's over. You need to go away and leave us alone. Ben's laugh deepened, and I could hear the malice in his tone. Oh, I'm not going anywhere, Lauren. You're not going to get rid of me that easily. This is just the beginning. You think you can protect Max? Think again. You'll see soon enough just how much control I still have. The call ended abruptly, and I was left standing there, the phone still pressed to my ear as the dial tone echoed in my ear. My whole body went cold. I dropped the phone into my lap, staring ahead at nothing. His words were like poison, seeping into my thoughts, tainting every ounce of peace I had left. Max was asleep in his room, blissfully unaware of the nightmare that was closing in on us. I didn't want him to know, not yet. But I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to do something. I had to find a way to protect him, to keep him safe from whatever Ben had planned. I paced around the apartment, my mind racing. Every decision, every move I made seemed to be one step closer to something I couldn't stop. What could I do? I'd already made it clear that Ben wasn't welcome in our lives anymore. But he wasn't listening. He never did. And now, I was starting to realize that I might have underestimated him. I couldn't take this on alone. I needed help. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in a long time. The line rang several times before someone picked up. Hello, a familiar voice answered. Sarah? I said, my voice shaking. It's Lauren. I need your help. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Lauren? What's wrong? You sound. Ben's back, I interrupted, feeling the weight of those words hit me like a ton of bricks. He's threatening me. He's been calling, and he said things, terrible things. I don't know what to do anymore, Sarah. I can't do this on my own. I need you. I could hear Sarah's breath catch on the other end. Oh my God. I knew something was off, but I didn't think he'd actually come after you again. You're not alone in this, okay? I'm going to help you. We'll figure this out. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back. I couldn't afford to break down now. Max needed me to be strong. Thank you. I don't know what else to do. Don't worry, we'll figure something out. First thing tomorrow, I'm coming over. We'll make a plan. I'm not going to let him hurt you, Lauren. The relief that washed over me was immediate, but it didn't last. I hung up the phone, staring at it for a moment before putting it down on the counter. What would happen next? What kind of plan could we even make? It wasn't like Ben would just walk away. If he was serious about what he said, then things were about to get a whole lot worse. I sat down at the kitchen table, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second stretching into eternity. I tried to focus on the small things, the sound of the refrigerator humming, the soft rustle of leaves outside as the wind picked up. Anything to ground myself. But it was impossible. I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was approaching, and it was coming for me, for Max. I just didn't know how to stop it. Max's soft voice broke my thoughts. I looked up to see him standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Mommy, are you okay?" he asked, his small form looking fragile in the dim light. I smiled at him, a thin, forced smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." Max walked over to me, climbing into my lap. He rested his head against my chest, and for a moment, I held him close, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing against me. In that moment, he was all that mattered. He was the reason I couldn't give up, the reason I couldn't let Ben win. The storm outside raged on, but I refused to let it consume me. Tomorrow, I would take action. I would protect my son, no matter what. The following day was a blur of preparation and anxiety. Sarah showed up early, as promised, and we spent hours brainstorming, strategizing, and making phone calls. We contacted the police, but they couldn't do much without concrete evidence. I didn't blame them, it was just that the lack of action from them felt like one more reminder that I was on my own in this. But I couldn't focus on that now. There was too much at stake. Max seemed oblivious to the gravity of the situation, and I made sure to keep him occupied with his favorite toys and cartoons. Every now and then, I would catch him looking at me with those big, trusting eyes, and it tore at my heart. I couldn't let him see how scared I really was. I had to stay strong, for him. Sarah and I had decided that we wouldn't just wait for Ben to come to us. We were going to make the first move, take control. We had to set a trap. We knew Ben was arrogant, he believed he could manipulate me, intimidate me, and keep me under his thumb. He was wrong. Around noon, Sarah helped me set up a meeting with Ben. The idea was simple. We would arrange for him to meet me in a public place, somewhere where I could get help if things went wrong. I knew it was risky, but it was the only option I had left. I wasn't going to hide anymore. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in the center of town. It was busy during the lunch rush, and I knew there would be plenty of people around. We arranged the time, and as the hours passed, my nerves were on edge. I tried to prepare myself for whatever confrontation was ahead, but there was no way to truly be ready for this. Not when I was facing the person who had terrorized my life for so long. When the time came, I took a deep breath, kissed Max goodbye, and left the apartment. Sarah was already waiting for me in her car, a quiet force of support. Her presence steadied me, but inside, I was shaking. We arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early. I could already see Ben's familiar form through the window, pacing back and forth outside. The sight of him made my heart race. He was here. And he was going to make his move. I took a deep breath and turned to Sarah. "Stay close. If anything goes wrong, I need you to call the police. I've got a hidden phone in my bag, but I might not be able to reach it if things escalate." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "Don't worry. I've got your back. Just be careful, okay?" With that, I got out of the car and walked towards the entrance. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. My eyes scanned the room, and there he was, sitting at a table by the window, watching me with that twisted grin. His eyes gleamed with that same sick pleasure he always got when he thought he was in control. I walked up to the table, my heart pounding in my chest. I forced myself to sit down across from him, pretending to be calm. I could feel his gaze on me, heavy and predatory. "So, you finally decided to show up," Ben said, his voice low and mocking. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "I have to admit, I didn't think you'd actually come. You've got a lot of nerve, Lauren." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a moment to steady my breath and focus. This was it, the moment that could either break me or set me free. "I came because I'm done, Ben," I said, my voice steady, but with an edge of finality. "I'm done with your games. I'm done living in fear. You've had your chance, and you've blown it. It's over." His lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was a smile that was sharp, cruel. You really think you can just walk away from me? You think you can get rid of me so easily? I met his gaze head-on, refusing to look away. I don't care what you think. You don't control me anymore. I'm done being your victim. For a moment, there was silence between us. I could see the rage building in his eyes, but I refused to back down. This was my life now. Max's life. And I wasn't going to let Ben tear it apart any longer. Ben stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back with a loud crash. You think you're so clever, don't you? His voice was rising, attracting the attention of a few people nearby. You're nothing without me. I'll make sure you remember that. I stood up too, putting distance between us. No, Ben. I'm not nothing. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. It was then that I noticed something strange. There was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, something that I hadn't expected. For a moment, he looked almost unsure, as if he hadn't expected me to be so resolute. But it didn't last. The venom returned to his gaze, and he took a step forward, his hand reaching for his jacket pocket. I didn't wait for him to make the first move. I already knew what I had to do. With a swift motion, I pulled out my phone, pressing the emergency button that I had set up earlier. Sarah, just outside the door, was already on the phone with the police. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but as Ben moved closer, I knew that I had no other choice. Ben froze, his eyes narrowing as he realized what had just happened. But it was too late. The police arrived moments later, storming into the coffee shop, their presence a wall between us. Ben didn't resist. He knew the game was up. The police arrested him without incident, but as they led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at me with those same cold eyes. This isn't over, Lauren, he spat. You can't escape me. I'll always find a way back. His words hung in the air, but I didn't flinch. I was done running. Done hiding. The chapter with Ben was closed. As the police car drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't over in the traditional sense, there would be court dates, investigations, and perhaps more challenges ahead. But I had won the most important battle. I had faced my fear and taken control of my own fate. I turned to Sarah, who had been watching the scene unfold from outside. It's over. We did it. She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to relax. The nightmare was finally behind me. And I could start rebuilding my life, one step at a time. As I headed back home, I thought about Max. I couldn't wait to see him, to hold him in my arms and reassure him that everything was going to be okay. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again.